are launching new models every year. Why? Because they want to just show, right? They just want to show that they are improving their technology, and the handset you are using, now we have a better technology. And we Indians, we don't know much about technology. We don't use even 10% of that technology, even if we know that we are not using that, still we are changing our handset every year. Right? It is not required at all, but it is because of the show off that we are just wasting our money. Every year people are changing handset. Every year they are changing the. This is just this is in economics we call demonstration effect. This is a term in economics, demonstration effect. Like one person purchases a new car, his friend says, okay, you purchase the new car, I will also purchase, though it is not required. One friend in the group, he changed the phone, now you start thinking, now I should also change the phone, though it is working well. So, that is putting pressure on the companies. Technology, obviously investment is required for it, and then price depends on cost, and cost depends on what? Scale of production. At high scale of production, per unit cost is less, so the price can be lowered. And this is what we face in globalization. Why Chinese companies are able to sell cheaper goods in India? Why? Because they are not technologically very sound. Many of these items, if you go to the market and you inquire about the guarantee, they say that this is Chinese, so no guarantee. Right? So, they are not playing on the basis in the market on the basis of the quality, they are playing on the basis of the price, because they know that India is a country with lot of low income people and they are searching for cheaper goods. So, they are targeting that section of Indian population, right. So, Indian companies or global companies, they are facing this problem and the pressure is increasing year after year, and also there is a change in the attitude of the consumers. Earlier, up to my generation, I will say there was a loyalty element. Like I know the elder generation, if they used Colgate toothpaste throughout the life, they used Colgate. If you give them some another brand, they will say, no, I use only Colgate, because they were satisfied customers. But today, you know what is the attitude today? We are not loyal to any brand in the world. They just give you some big offer, you just change loyalty. And this is true for other things also. The maximum damage that has happened after globalization or this era, the maximum damage that I observe is that of loyalty. Loyalty towards friend, loyalty within the family, right? Loyalty to brand, and this is a very serious issue. Even the loyalty of your servant. I know some people, the servants were so loyal, they were more loyal than your family members. But now it is very difficult to get such people. So, this is loss of loyalty and companies are facing the outcome. And that is why they are trying to befool the consumers by launching the same product as a new series. Nothing is changed, some minor changes here and there, and then they say that this is new, right. So, this is a challenge every company faces, and those companies which really face these challenges and they do something, they can do something, then they will save more because the profitability is more, because saving is about profitability. Now, as far as the government sector is concerned, government saving obviously again is about difference between income and expenditure, and lot of reforms are going on, so that we will discuss in fiscal issues. But just a few words I will say here. In the income side, what is the most important issue to be addressed? Just think and tell me. Right. I am getting some statements in defense of the companies that without competition, bargaining power of a customer decreases. It is because we have alternatives. So, okay, that is all fine, but what I am saying is that these are the issues we need to understand and address. Right. Income. What is the largest source of income? Obviously, that is tax revenue. And yesterday I told you that we have to discuss the tax issue in much detail. One complete class, maybe even more, will be dedicated to tax issues only, right? But tax revenue issue is to be addressed. And then expenditure side, wasteful expenditure, this is another big issue. Wasteful expenditure is to be curtailed. Somebody is suggesting disinvestment, yes, that is also source of revenue, but that is not indefinite source, but tax is indefinite source. But that can be considered, no problem. So, wasteful expenditure, and this is another big issue. When I say wasteful expenditure, I mean, say for example, let us talk about subsidy, that is a topic also in your main syllabus. Now, subsidy. Now, whether subsidy is good or bad, how will you say this? Now, in subsidy, I just want to tell one thing to you. Whenever, if you get question in mains or even if in say personality test, whether you agree there should be subsidy. Yes, you say India is a country with 22% poor population. We have weaker sections like small and cottage industries, like agriculture. Within agriculture, we have 86% of farmers is small and marginal. In this scenario, subsidy is inevitable, number one. So, never say that we should stop subsidy, right? But yes, subsidy should be well targeted. We should make sure that subsidy should go only to the poor people, to the weaker sections of the population. There should not be leakages, right, like direct benefit transfer. You know, after the introduction of National Food Security Act, and especially after 2014, when a lot of technology was used by the government, like linking of Aadhaar, about 3 crore fake ration cards were cancelled in India. Just imagine, 3 crore fake ration cards. Then lakhs of these gas connections, because people were having multiple gas connections and there was misuse, right. So, then it should not be inverted structure. Inverted structure means you are giving less subsidy to the poor and more subsidy to the rich. Like in the farmers case, this is the biggest issue. It is happening, you know why? Because the big farmers, they are getting larger part of the subsidy, and the small and marginal farmers, they are getting less. I tell you just one data, you see. 86% of the farmers are small and marginal in India, and their total share in agricultural land is approximately 45%. You see, like we are giving fertilizer subsidy, that is the second largest subsidy given by the government of India, and it is approximately 70,000 crore per year. You see, if a small farmer with just 0.4 hectare of land holding, that is 1 acre, in one crop, he will be using just 2 bags of urea. That is the maximum requirement. And the government, you know, the government is giving more than 50% subsidy on urea. Nobody is there to tell this fact to the farmers. And that is why it is easy, very easy for opposition parties and political leaders to say that the governments are not doing anything for farmers. This is the fact. In urea, the subsidy is more than 50%. The cost of urea is say 500, so 250 is paid by the government, rest is paid by the farmer. So 250 rupee per bag subsidy, to how much of small farmer is getting just 500 rupees in one crop, another 500 rupees in another crop, 2 major crops, so how much the small farmer is getting? Just 1000 rupees. But on the other side, there is a big farmer with 10-20 hectares, he is taking 50-100 bags of urea. So one farmer is getting lot of subsidy, but whenever there is any discussion on any platform, everybody is saying small and marginal farmers, and they are not ready to realize this thing, that larger part of all this is going to the big farmers in the name of small farmers. This is to be corrected. If you really want to give to the big farmers, okay, give it, but then don't say that this is for small and marginal farmers, right? So inverted structure, this is called inverted structure. And another very important issue is that the taxpayers should not get the subsidy. Like I am a taxpayer, I am paying lakhs of rupees to the government as income tax. Just imagine, should I get the subsidy on LPG? Because the purpose, what is the purpose of subsidy? I tell you a very simple thing. The purpose of subsidy is redistribution of income. The government is taking this money from the rich in the form of tax and transferring this to the poor as subsidy to reduce the inequality, right? But just imagine that the government is taking money from the rich and giving it back to the rich. What is the purpose? And that is why earlier everybody was getting subsidy, whether you want it or not. But when the Prime Minister announced few years ago that there is a provision in the app, you just press give it up and you will stop, the subsidy will not be given to you. The same day I did it. And in India, it is very, I feel happy about it, that 1.25 crore people, they stopped receiving willingly. That is important. Willingly. You know, we should always think about very positive things that are happening in the economy. Unfortunately, we are always thinking about the bad things that are happening. Similarly, the railways introduced a very interesting column in that reservation slip. You know, we have a provision of concession for senior citizens. So now they have introduced one thing there. You have to just say yes or no, whether you are willing to take this concession or not. Obviously, many of our senior citizens are well off. They are retired government servants or business class people. There are lakhs of cases in India reported by railways that people are willingly saying, no, I don't want subsidy, and they are paying full fare. Should we not appreciate these people, and these stories should be published in the newspaper so that others are also encouraged? Because in a country like India, we have a democracy, and politics also plays its role, and withdrawing the subsidy from any group is so difficult politically. So, now the best policy is to encourage, and this is working in fact, not 100%, but to a larger extent this is working. So, whatever subsidy is something a very big issue we have to discuss in much detail, and that is in your syllabus also. So, be careful about this word subsidy. There may be many other things we will discuss later on. So, now I hope you overall understand household sector interest in the banking system and inflation rate is important. Private corporate sector global competitiveness is important, that will make that will decide whether private corporate sectors are able to save or not, and in the government sector we have to overhaul this whole income and expenditure side, so that the saving rate can be increased. And everything that I have mentioned is a big issue. The only thing is that if nothing is happening, the topic remains dormant, and if something happens, suddenly it comes into the limelight, and then for that year it is important. But I am not considering whether it is important or not, I am just trying to give you all the important topics, so that whenever something appears in the newspaper, you read it carefully. Okay? Now, once saving issue is over, suppose let us just for a moment believe that, or we accept this fact that we are able to increase the saving rate. So, can we say that investment rate will automatically increase? Can we say that saving is equal to investment? Now, theoretically people may say like this, but actually there are many investment issues also, that I call factors of investment. So, what are these factors? You know, very first factor that is crucial for every investor is demand. If demand is not increasing, why some company will invest to produce more? Suppose take the case of Maruti, they are producing 10 lakh cars per year. Now, they have to take a decision whether set up a fourth plant or not. They have already 3 plants, whether to increase the capacity or not. So, which factor will guide their decision? Obviously, the demand factor. If the company management thinks that now we are selling 10 lakh cars, in another 2-3 years we will be able to sell 12 lakh cars, so it is the right time to start investment, so that after 3 years we can produce 12 lakh cars. But if they realize that they are finding it difficult to sell even 10 lakh cars that they can produce, why to increase the capacity? And this applies to every producer in India. But this demand, when we are talking about demand, there are 2 sources of demand. One is the domestic demand, means from within the country, and then foreign demand, that you can also write export demand. Now, domestic demand depends on domestic income. If our income is increasing, our purchasing capacity is increasing, obviously we will be spending more. That is why in this COVID year everybody is saying one thing, that the demand is depressed. Right? Why the demand is depressed? You know, demand depends on 2 things, one actual and one psychological factor is also there. What is actual? That somebody is working, is getting some salary, that is actual. But then if due to any reason there is a fear of losing job, now the psychology starts working. Whether a person will actually lose job or not, it is another thing. But the day he feels he may lose job, he will just start decreasing the expenditure, right. So that is what happening in India today. Because of COVID, many people lost the jobs, maybe for some months, right. And you know, the best placed people were IT people. They were working from home, enjoying home food and getting full salary, right. So they were best placed. Government employees, they also were getting the full salary, but they have to work very hard because they were the warriors, right? Whether it was police or administration or doctors, they had to work very hard for the same salary, right. So that is one thing. If you think that okay, domestic demand is not increasing that fast, you have the choice, you can export. But then when you try to export, immediately you face global competition. So who can export more? Those who are globally competitive. And again the whole issue comes, who will be globally competitive? Those who are technologically sound, those who are producing at higher scale, those who can reduce their cost. So this is a global competition. Demand is also global now. As we are trying to capture others' demand through export, they have an eye on our market. Indian companies are targeting to export to Europe. We are exporting cars to Europe and they are exporting their cars to India. Now who will win this battle? Obviously, the better one will win. That is actually, it is very critical issue and very difficult to say anything about it. We can just analyze the factors. We cannot make any judgment who is going to win. Obviously, the better one will be will remain in the market. But at the same time, demand is one factor and a big factor. But another factor that is equally important, if not less, is policy of the government. Policy of the government. You know, the first factor in policy is that it should be long-term policy. Long-term policy. Because investment is always a long-term decision. Any firm or a company setting up a plant is thinking about 50-20 years. And if the government changes after every 5 years in India, and they are not politically mature, what they will do? They will say, okay, fine, we will change the policy because we don't agree with the policies of the previous government. And if our political parties are not mature regarding these things, and they try to do this, they are actually harming the companies and through the companies their own economy. And this is the difference between China and India. In China, there is one party, one government, one policy, and that continues. So investors, they don't face any problem. But in India, this fear is always there. But I am happy to tell you that whatever they say in parliament, whatever they say on the streets, ultimately, after the reforms especially, we have realized this thing. And despite the changes in the governments, the emphasis may increase or decrease, the policies remain the same, right? And that is the good change that I witnessed after 1991. Because now the political parties, they have also realized, okay, if it is election rally, they can say anything. Many absurd things people say in election rally, and it may be far from the truth. because they have to just convince the voters. But the facts are different. Fact is that I tell you 1991, now this is 2021, 30 years. In these 30 years, all the political parties led by different big parties, UPA, NDA, whatever, they were in power. Whenever they were in power, they were pro-reformist, and when they were in opposition, they were anti-reformist. And this is I am saying for every political party, because that is the type of politics we have in India. But actually what has happened, reform is unidirectional. The only difference is that the pace can be increased or decreased, but there is no possibility of U-turn. For example, disinvestment. Who started disinvestment in India? 1991, Prime Minister was Narasimha Rao, Finance Minister was Mr. Manmohan Singh. He is getting all the credit for reforms, no problem, but then you also take the credit for disinvestment. But when you started this, then came Atal Bihari Vajpayee, 90s, late 90s and 6 years. In between this, there were coalition governments, weak governments. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, he also continued with the same policy, disinvestment, privatization continued. Then came UPA 1. UPA 1 was supported by left parties and they are always very much against this. So, UPA 1 there was less disinvestment. But UPA 2 left parties, they were out of the government, again disinvestment started. And this government 6-7 years in power, they are also doing the same. This is the best example to understand this whole thing. So, do not be guided by political parties, read the documents, what happened during these 30 years, who did what, and then you realize suddenly that okay, all these political parties in power are doing the same thing, right. So, keep economics separate from politics. So, policy should be long term, and I am happy to tell you that this is actually happening now. But at the same time, our policy should be positive and proactive. Positive and proactive. What is a positive policy? Right, first. You see, there was a phase, first phase of Indian economy, that was era of restrictions. We call it with different names like license Raj, quota permit Raj. It means that was the era when for everything you have to go to the government and ask for permission or license. So, that was negative, restrictive. Then reforms started. For 10 years, it was to a certain extent neutral policy, means restrictions removed. Now, if you wish, you invest, otherwise no problem. But this neutrality is not working. So, now what is the change? Now, our policies have moved in the positive direction, means when I am using the word positive means the policy to promote. Promotion word you may use for positive, and all the governments are trying to do that, right. And proactive word I have also added here, because the government should do it proactively. Do not wait for the things to happen and then you react. You just like, it is just like say industrial body goes to the ministry and say that these are the problems we face, and then the industry reacts. That is one way of doing things. Another more proactive way means the government should reach out to these investors and say that I want to help you what is your problem, is everything fine, then it is proactive policy. Then inviting, promoting, whatever word you can use, but I am using the word positive and proactive, because policy aspect has become very important. You know, when there were no choices, it was a closed economy era. So, if you are Indian investor, if you are Indian businessman, whatever happens to you, you have to remain here, you have to work here, you have to set up businesses here. But we should not forget this fact that now in this global era, the whole world is open. And then, like we have a tendency in India to abuse private sector. Obviously, private sector means there is profit motive. It is always there. There is nothing new about this. But then if we do it, okay, once in a while find that private sector is not good because it is profit seeking entity. So, saying a fact is not a problem. But if we overdo it, it is sort of discouraging. If we abuse our investors, if we abuse our corporates, if we use trade unions against their companies, you know what is going to happen? Now they have so many choices. For example, I tell you, Calcutta some years ago, it was hub for textile, jute and textile. But what happened? This is very bad for India, not only for West Bengal, bad for India also. This all started, say, a couple of decades ago, when there was a lot of agitations against corporates, and now many of Indian units, I do not know whether you are aware about this or not, they have shifted their businesses to Bangladesh, and now company is Indian, the goods are coming from Bangladesh. They are producing in Bangladesh and exporting to India. And I tell you that for past few years, the growth rate of textile sector in Bangladesh is better than that of India. Why? Because you forced your companies to move out. This is not going to help. It may be politically correct, but it is going to badly affect your economy, right? So, this is just one example I have given to you. Message is clear that we should ensure a fair play for everybody, but we should not accuse anybody, right? So, policies are going to play a big role, and policy means the government, right? Now, after this, we have more factors of growth and development. I discussed number 1, ICOR and COR, then I discussed saving as a factor, then I discussed investment as a factor, right. Now, next is marketable surplus of agriculture. Somebody is asking, privatization doing by this government is good or not. You see, I would suggest one thing. When you think about these issues, like what is my objection? I read again, privatization doing by this government is good or not. Now, I would be happy if you remove this part of the sentence, this government. When you say this government, it means there is a political angle in your question. You must ask, and I should reply and I will reply, whether privatization is good for India or not. Then it is a fair question. You are getting my point? So, Okay, stop asking questions. Somebody is asking about Atmanirbhar. I'll come to industrial sector and then I'll explain everything. Make in India, made in India, Atmanirbhar Bharat, all that I will discuss. But let me complete this thing first. So, marketable surplus of agriculture. First, try to understand this phrase itself, marketable surplus of agriculture. You know, we use our term cash crop. So, why some crops are called cash crops? Because there are certain crops which are grown for the purpose of selling only, encashment. So, encashment of like sugar cane, cotton, jute, tea, coffee, rubber, whatever is produced, the farmers are selling the whole thing. So, purpose is encashment. So, these crops are cash crops. But can we use the same term for food grain crops, wheat, rice, etc.? We never use the term cash crop. Though we know it very well, the farmers are selling wheat and rice also. Why? What is the difference? The difference is that the food grain crops, whatever is produced, first the farmer makes sure that enough is available for the family. And whatever is the surplus after that, that only goes to the market. So, when I use the word marketable surplus, it means I am not talking about cash crops. In the cash crop, 100% is a marketable surplus. But in food grain crop, marketable surplus is over and above their own requirement. Now, how is it is so important that I am discussing this as a factor of growth and development? Just because of our huge population. You know, in India, out of the total population, if you just think about it, 2011 census says that 31% population is urban, 69 is rural, fine. But within the rural India, you know, everybody is not farmer. Half of the people staying in rural areas, they have the lands. So, the farmers may be just 30% of the total population. Now, for this 30% of the population, food is not a problem because they are the growers and they have the first right on the food. But what about the remaining 70%? They are dependent on the surplus, and this 70% means 90 crore. If this surplus is not available in sufficient quantities, we will face food crisis in cities. Now, many people say that, okay, fine, if we have shortage, we can import. Theoretically, there is no problem. Yes, this is what anybody will do. But then we should not forget the fact that there is not enough available in the world market. So, we cannot purchase large quantities, it is impossible. And in this context, I tell you very important incident that happened 12, 13 years ago. You know, it was, I guess, 2008 year, and there was a estimate that this year the crop of wheat was not very good, and there was expectation of low production, and it was UPA 1 government and Sharad Pawar was the minister. So, as you know, the media persons in India, what is their attitude? They will put mic in your mouth and they will put their words in your mouth if you are not alert enough. So, they were just repeatedly asking this question, sir, we are expecting means less production, so what you are going to do? So, out of frustration or very casually, whatever you say, Sharad Pawar just said that, okay, fine, if there is problem, we can import 10-20 lakh tons of wheat. What is the problem? And he is a person who claims to be a agriculturist, but he is more interested in cricket, you know. And he said it very casually. Next day what happened, you know how the things get distorted. Next day what happened, this became the headline in the newspaper, that India is going to import wheat. Okay, fine. Within few days, this news entered into the international market. And you know that Chicago is the biggest commodity market in the world. Like the oil is produced in Middle East, but the global prices are fixed in Chicago market. Chicago is the biggest commodity market in the world. That year, in Chicago market, the price of wheat started increasing. And it was somewhere 1600 to 1700 per quintal in Chicago market, while in India it was 1200 rupees per quintal. Now that was very much against the interest of smaller economies, because there are so many small economies, they are just purchasing because they can't produce everything. These are small island economies, right? And they were all complaining. Things did not end here. Then a statement comes from the US president that this food crisis that the world is facing today is because of India and China. They have huge population. Then India responded to that, that no, it is not because of us, because we need food for, that is basic necessity, we need wheat for food, but you are more responsible because you are converting food into biofuel. That can be avoided. Can you imagine the outcome of one such statement by one minister? I told this incident to you just to make you realize how sensitive this issue is. It is not simply the availability of food. For a country like India, whenever later on when we discuss about agriculture, always remember that food security, if you have to answer the question on food security, always insist on self-sufficiency. Never say we can import, because when you are importing, this issue will always come, like we face that in pulses. You know, our pulses production, it increased past 6 years, can you believe 6-7 years, it increased from a level of 14 million ton to 24 million ton. Just unimaginable, 14 to 24. But our demand is approximately 25-26 million ton, so we are dependent on import even today. But as the agriculture in India is dependent on monsoon, so fluctuations are there, and any year if the pulses production is down by say 1 million ton, dependence on import increases, prices start rising, because availability of pulses is not much in international market. So we have to understand and realize these facts. So that is why marketable surplus is important, right? Now another term that is terms of foreign trade, terms of foreign trade. Now what is this concept, terms of foreign trade? I guess many of you have heard the name of Dada Bhai Nauroji, the grand old man of India. Now, he is known for one great work, Drain of Wealth, right? And he wrote a book, Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. And in that book, he proved that India was a very rich country. It was during British period that we became poor because of drain of wealth. Obviously, Britishers never accepted this, but now we have enough literature available, enough research and data available to prove this fact that for poverty of India, the British Raj is only responsible. And they looted $45 trillion from India over this period. And there are researches about economic history of the world which say that the share of India in global GDP was 25% when the Britishers arrived here, and their share was just 2%. And when they left India, their share was 25% and our share was 2%. And some years ago, Shashi Tharoor said it in Britain, and after that it became very popular. But I am saying this in my class for more than 10 years. Right? So this is now in public domain. Nothing can be denied. But the question is how this happened, because we cannot reverse that thing. But we have to now understand how this happened. You see, it is very simple. Suppose there are three countries at different levels of development, A, B and C. A is least developed, next is B, and then it is C. Now, least developed means they are not technologically developed, like African countries today in the world. And you know that they have huge resources, natural resources. Suppose there is a country and it has minerals like iron ore, but it cannot convert that into steel. So what it will do? It will sell it to B, and B will convert it into steel. But then B will sell it to some developed country, and that will convert into some product. This is how the chain is established. But what is the problem in this chain? That the value of iron ore, if I start with 1000 rupees, now when this is converted into steel, the conversion cost is 1000 rupees, but the price is never 1 plus 1, 2000. Price is always much more than this. And this is the profit to state, to country B. And this price we are paying for the technology. Similarly, this is sold to C, and C is charging 10,000 rupees for this. Now, if there is a trade between A and C, if we skip B, we just think about A and C. Just for the balance of trade, A has to sell 10 units of iron ore to get 1 unit of the product. And if this continues over decades and decades, what will happen? The wealth, that is iron ore of A, is moving towards C. This is what Britishers did to us. They forced us to just produce raw material for them. India was, in fact, and I am never able to understand why in history people are not telling all this, because they are bound by what some historians and the authors said, so they are sticking to that. But the reality is, India was, like in any book you read, unfortunately in NCERT what they say, India was agrarian economy. Yes, India was agrarian economy at the time of independence, but not in 18th century. In 18th century, India was a manufacturing economy. That is why it was manufacturing 25% of global GDP. And who were the manufacturers? They were in villages. India was a hub for small and cottage industries. We have great artisans producing clothes like muslin. That was the lightest material, muslin, right? So, from manufacturing economy to agrarian economy, this conversion was because of the colonial rule. But how this concept is relevant today? Today also this difference in development is there. Now, some economy like African economy at A dealing with Europe and America at C, obviously we are also trying to do the same. We are trying to establish friendly relations with African nations. Why? Because we are targeting their natural resources. China is already there, European companies are there, somebody is in diamond mining, somebody is in coal mining because they do not have the technology, and we are offering them the technology just to get their raw material. Okay. So, for us what is the message? Our message is that try to move to C as fast as possible, because if you are at C, it means you are purchasing the raw material, importing the raw material at low cost and selling it back at high cost. It means you are a gainer in international trade. But if it is just the opposite, you are purchasing the raw material, you are selling the raw material, getting less for it, and then purchasing the finished goods, the drain of wealth continues. And that is the whole issue in WTO. You know, later on when you read about the WTO and the external sector, when the WTO negotiations started, it is very interesting that the European countries, America, what they were saying, you know, liberalization, liberalization, only liberalization is the possibility. And all the international organizations under guidance from developed countries, they were also emphasizing that liberalization is the best prescription for you. We were at the receiving end, we were hesitant, that is 1990s. But what happened over past 20 years, the emerging economies like India, China, Brazil and other countries, we have developed our technologies, and now we are so close to these developed economies in various sectors that now they are defensive. Before we started saying Atmanirbhar Bharat, it was US President who says America first. Who is under pressure today? It is not India or China, it is Europe and America, they are under pressure. And that is why WTO has stopped functioning. Now, they are not ready for new negotiations. They are not ready to come on the negotiation table. They are under pressure. So, within WTO, there are two phases. One, when they were dominating, now the developing economies are dominating. And that is why there is no problem if somebody says that this era is going to be, this century is going to be the Asian century. Asian economies are going to dominate because Europe is stagnant. The growth rates are minimum, right? So, whatever survival is expected is through some technologies where they have the advantage. Otherwise, in larger part of it, Asian economies are going to dominate, right? So, this is the whole concept is called terms of trade, terms of foreign trade. And now, if I say this in a very simple manner, terms of trade is simply a comparison between average import cost or import price and average export price. We compare what is our average import price and average export price. Right. So, if our average export price is more, it is favorable. If our average import price is more, it is against us. So, whether the trade, international trade is favorable or against, it depends on what we are importing and exporting. In other words, we can say what is average import price and average export price. And you know very well, average export price will be more only if we sell more and more finished goods, and it will be more and more if we are using high end technologies. That is why whenever I think about international trade, and we should stop, or rather try to stop those things which are low technology items and we are unnecessarily importing them. And because of slippage in our policies, you can say, there is a very interesting example I tell you. Agarbatti, you all understand. Now, what is the technology involved there? We just need a bamboo stick and some material to be fixed on that. There is a very interesting case of this. Some of the environmentalists under pressure, and I don't know how these things happen, and we don't know, and we realize it after many years. Under pressure from environmentalists, the bamboo was put in the restricted list. So, you cannot cut bamboo, and that is the basic material for this. And so, China got the opportunity. They started selling bamboo sticks to India, and after many years when the government realized, and this is a story told by Nitin Gadkari in one of his interviews. He said that when they realized it, they wrote to the environment ministry that please tell us bamboo, whether bamboo is a tree or a grass. So, the ministry replied, no, bamboo is technically a grass. So, then they said that if it is a grass, it is not a tree, how you can ban it? Then the ban was lifted. But in the meantime, you know what happened? 80% of the bamboo stick we were using from China, and our small and cottage industries, they were suffering. Now, we are trying to reverse that trend. There are so many stories I can tell you, but just I am giving you examples how the policies, sometimes they miss the things and we face the consequences. Right? So, this is called terms of trade, terms of foreign trade, and this is one important aspect of development, because what we export will decide whether it will enrich our economy or it will lead to drain of wealth. And that is why technological development is so important. Okay. Today there is no that what you call it activity class. So, if there is no problem, I may take 10 minutes more, right. I should take advantage of the situation. Right. Now, after this, because I wanted to reach up to a point. So, now after this we have another issue, that is called strategy of development. Priyanshu is saying that if the century is for Asians, then India and China must work together, but the reality is opposite. Yes, politically it is correct, but it is for China to realize, not for India. Now, what is the strategy? Strategy is nothing but, say, a policy like thing. But why we discuss it? Because in economics we talk about two strategies. One is the called balanced and another is called unbalanced. Balanced growth strategy and unbalanced growth strategy. And the difference is that balanced growth strategy means the development of all the sectors simultaneously. That is the meaning of balance here. Development of all the sectors simultaneously is called balanced growth strategy. And if we focus on one sector first and others they follow, then it is called unbalanced. So, unbalanced means focus on one sector that will lead the economy and followed by other sectors. So, we have created imbalance in favor of one sector. Obviously, we have different theories, and the theories are broadly classified into two categories: balanced growth theories and unbalanced. And obviously, somebody is saying that why can't we just start with basics of economics and then go for all these aspects. Whatever I am telling is only basics of the economics, right. I could never understand. I am teaching for more than 25 years, but many people come to me and they say that first I want to learn basics, and I could never understand what they mean with this word basic. So, they have just learned from somewhere that there is some basic of economics. Man, whatever I am telling to you is only basics of the economics, right. Because economics starts after this. So, balanced growth strategy means all, and they have their arguments, and their argument is very simple. What they say is that all the sectors of the economy are interrelated. So, if we go for a balanced approach, faster growth is possible, and they are very true to a certain extent, because if you just see the case in India, we have a big textile sector, but the textile sector growth depends on growth of cotton in agriculture. We have a very fast growing food processing sector, but its growth depends on production of fruits and vegetables in agriculture. That is one type of relationship. But there is a reverse relationship also. There are so many goods being produced by industry and consumed by agriculture. For example, tractor industry, pesticides industry, there are other agricultural implements. And not only this, now our rural India has reached a point where they are big consumers today. Maybe 20-30 years ago, there was huge difference between consumption pattern in urban areas and rural areas. But today, if you visit the shops in rural areas, you will get all sort of things there that we consume in urban areas. Whether it is cosmetics, every cosmetic is available there, right. I recently went to my native place, and I went to a shop to buy something, and a fellow came and he said, "Oh, Revital hai kya?" I was surprised, and he gave some packet. So he said, no, it is not men's, women wala chahiye. It means if Revital has reached up to the village, just imagine whether it is Bournvita, Horlicks, chips, Coke, what has not reached there. But interesting thing is that this will grow faster if rural income increases, and that is agriculture. You know, it is like you think about motorcycle, bike industry. In urban areas, there is saturation. You think about, say, television, there is saturation in urban areas. Every home has something. If the Hero Honda wants to sell more, they have to sell more in rural areas. That is why today you will not get any hoarding of Hero Honda in rural, urban areas, but you will get lot of hoardings in rural areas, because they know that today 50% or more than 50% of their goods are being sold in rural areas. That is the market. So, faster increase in agriculture income is going to support your industry. That is the strong linkage. Like I always say, and that has actually happened, unfortunately. I never meant that, but I was always saying in my class that if civil services coachings, they shift from Delhi to some other city, the Delhi edition of Hindu will not survive. And this has really happened, right? So, there is a strong linkages. So, for a moment you may have started thinking that balanced growth strategy is good. But before that, let us say about unbalanced growth. Those who support unbalanced growth strategy, they don't criticize balanced growth strategy, but they just put forward another argument. They say, okay, fine, balanced growth strategy is a good strategy, we also know that. But then they say that, tell me one thing, whether we are discussing the growth strategy of a developed country or undeveloped country. Obviously, the answer is underdeveloped country. And then there is another question that, can this underdeveloped country it has enough capital to invest in all the sectors? Because all the underdeveloped economies, this is the biggest problem, that they are capital deficient. And now they argue that if a small amount of capital is thinly spread over the whole economy, nothing will develop. And India has experienced it for decades. You visit any sector of the economy. Now the things have started improving, but still we face this difficulty, whether you visit road sector, railways, irrigation, everywhere. Why the projects are delayed? In majority of the cases you will get the answer that capital is not available. Every year, in I guess it was 2004-05, there was a report about irrigation in India, and the report said that there were 500 incomplete irrigation projects at that time, and irrigation projects are state projects. So they just started the projects without taking care of the availability of capital, and ultimately what happened, every year they are giving some money out of the budget, some work is done and then it is stopped, they again wait for the next budget. And some of the projects started in second and third plan and they are still incomplete. Why? Because, and this is the difference between a government project and a private project. We have DMRC in Delhi, they are always ahead of the schedule. Why? Because they start the project after arranging the money. All the private companies will do that. The Reliance Petroleum in Jamnagar, that is a world record, they completed this huge refinery in 37 months. This is world record. Such huge refinery. Why? Because capital was not a problem. Now, after telling you all this, finally what we have to, why we are discussing this, because when we started the planning process in India, the question that we faced was, which of the two is good for us? And like I am telling to you, I just said in very brief, there was a debate for a few months on this, and almost every economist, known economist, was involved in this debate. And finally what was approved was unbalanced growth strategy. And this is what is popularly known as Mahalanobis model, that started or used in second 5-year plan. Right? So this strategy, today nobody is talking about the balanced or unbalanced growth strategy. That is a non-issue today, right? But if we go into the history, if there is some historical question, then this is useful, that because whenever we talk about 5-year plans, obviously Mahalanobis is the most important name. So what was the name of his strategy? That becomes important. So it was a unbalanced growth strategy. Sometimes we also use the word model. So there is basically no difference between a strategy and model. When something is said theoretically, it is a strategy, but the same thing when it is presented in the form of a mathematical formula, then it is called a model, right? Because when the things are simple, we can say it directly, but when the things are complex, like if it is just one known and one unknown variable, you can calculate easily. But if there are many variables involved simultaneously, we use complicated equations, and this complicated equation is called model. So, but you need not worry about all this. This is a branch of economics that is called development economics, and those who study MA economics or MPhil, they are involved into this. For GS, you have to just know that yes, this is the meaning of a strategy, and the most important model in India was Mahalanobis model, right. So, that is all for today, but tomorrow I will just explain what we did under Mahalanobis model, and then I will move to the next topic, right. So, there is a question that after this basic classes, which chapter we take it first, so that it is better for to read the chapter from NCERT. You know this, let me tell this thing, that this is introductory part. After that, I will take another say few minutes to complete it. Then half an hour I will give to salient features of Indian economy, where I have to discuss 4 or 5 words, like what is dual economy, what is mixed economy, what is emerging economy, these type of things. And then I will start the new topic, and that is the first topic in fact after introduction, and I will start with national income accounting, because I know that this is the one of the difficult chapters, and I deliberately start from there, because once you understand a difficult thing, your confidence is high, right. So, I will start from a difficult, but I will make it very easy for you, right. So, do not worry about it, right. So, first I will complete the introductory part. So, tomorrow's first topic will be national income accounting, where I will explain GDP, GNP, NDP and NP, every concept of national income accounting I will complete tomorrow. Okay? Thank you.